An Arab billionaire wins a single mother at a high-stakes auction, expecting a year of quiet companionship, but her secret past and his family's dangerous scheming ignite a whirlwind that changes their lives forever. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Trinity Robinson stared at her reflection in the mirror of her small Atlanta apartment bathroom. Her hands were shaking as she applied the last touches of makeup. The walls were thin enough that she could hear her 8-year-old son Marcus playing video games in the living room. The sound of his laughter made her heart ache. Everything she was about to do was for him. "Baby, come here for a minute," Trinity called out. Marcus paused his game and ran to the bathroom. He was wearing his favorite Spider-Man t-shirt, the one that was getting too small, but he refused to give up. "What's wrong, Mom?" he asked, noticing how dressed up she was. "Are you going somewhere?" Trinity knelt down to his level. "I have to go away for a little business trip. Mrs. Jackson from next door will stay with you for a few days." "But you never go on business trips," Marcus said, his bottom lip trembling. Trinity pulled him into a tight hug, fighting back tears. She couldn't tell him the truth, that she was flying to Dubai to participate in something called a companionship auction. The words made her sick to her stomach, but with the medical bills piling up and the threat of eviction looming, she was out of options. Her friend Lisa, who worked at a high-end escort service, had told her about these auctions. "It's completely legal," Lisa had assured her. "Rich men bid for a year-long companionship contract. No funny business unless you want it. The money can change your life." Trinity hadn't slept for days after getting the invitation. The agency had been impressed by her background, college-educated, former choir singer, working as an administrative assistant at a law firm. They said she had the perfect mix of class and exotic appeal for their Middle Eastern clients. The words made her skin crawl, but the potential payout kept her from walking away. "I'll be back before you know it," Trinity promised Marcus. "And when I come back, things are going to be different, better." That night, after dropping Marcus off at Mrs. Jackson's apartment, Trinity boarded a flight to Dubai. The agency had given her a first-class ticket, designer clothes, and strict instructions. "Smile, be charming, but play hard to get," the coordinator had said. "These men love a challenge." The Dubai she saw from the taxi window looked like something out of a science fiction movie. Gleaming skyscrapers stretched toward the clouds, their surfaces reflecting the desert sun. The auction house was in one of these buildings, a towering structure of glass and steel. Inside, Trinity found herself in a room full of beautiful women from all over the world. Some looked confident, practiced. Others, like her, couldn't hide their nervousness. They were all given numbers and told to wait backstage. "Number 23, a woman with a headset called out. "You're next." Trinity's legs felt like lead as she walked onto the stage. The lights were so bright she could barely make out the audience. Wealthy men in traditional Arab dress and Western suits, sitting at elegant tables with champagne glasses in front of them. The auctioneer began his pitch. "Ladies and gentlemen, let me present Trinity Robinson from Atlanta, Georgia. 32 years old, educated at Spelman College, fluent in English and basic French, a talented singer with a background in gospel music." Trinity stood there, her face burning with shame, as the man listed her qualities like features on a car. The bidding started at $100,000. She kept her eyes fixed on a point on the back wall, trying to imagine she was somewhere else. Then a voice cut through the noise. $1 million. The room fell silent. Trinity's eyes snapped to the source of the voice. A man had stood up from his table, tall, imposing, dressed in an impeccable white thobe. His face was handsome but hard, like it was carved from stone. "Mr. Al-Hassan," the auctioneer stuttered. "Are you sure about that bid?" "Did I stutter?" Malik Al-Hassan's voice was cold, brooking no argument. $1 million for the American. No one dared to bid against him. The auctioneer's gavel fell with a sound that echoed through Trinity's bones. Just like that, her life had been bought and sold. Backstage, her hands wouldn't stop shaking as she signed the contract. 1 year of companionship in exchange for $1 million. The agency would take their cut, but it would still be enough to secure Marcus's future. Private school, college fund, a house in a better neighborhood. "Mr. Al-Hassan will send a car for you tomorrow morning," the coordinator told her. "Here's a copy of the contract and his family's etiquette requirements." That night, alone in her luxury hotel room, Trinity finally let herself cry. She pulled out her phone and looked at a picture of Marcus. "It's just 1 year," she whispered to herself. 1 year to change our lives forever. But as she read through the contract one last time, her blood ran cold. There, in small print, was a clause she hadn't noticed before. The companion agrees not to bear any children during the contract period or to make any claims on the client's family legacy. Trinity's hand went to her stomach instinctively. She wasn't pregnant, but the idea that someone could dictate what she did with her body made her feel sick. Even worse, what would happen if they found out about Marcus? She thought about running, catching the next flight back to Atlanta, but the contract had already been signed. The money would be transferred soon. There was no turning back now. As she lay in bed that night, staring at the glittering Dubai skyline through her window, Trinity had no way of knowing that her biggest challenge wouldn't be keeping Marcus a secret. It would be fighting the unexpected feelings that would grow between her and the cold, complicated man who had just bought a year of her life. Malik Al-Hassan sat in his study, watching the sun rise over Dubai. He hadn't slept. The events of the previous night kept playing in his mind. What had possessed him to bid such an outrageous sum? He had only attended the auction because his business partner insisted it would be good networking, but something about Trinity Robinson had caught his attention. It wasn't just her beauty. There had been many beautiful women on that stage. No, it was the way she held herself, proud, even in submission. The flash of defiance in her eyes even as she was being sold to the highest bidder. His phone buzzed. Another message from his sister Amira. "Have you lost your mind? A black American woman? What will people say?" Malik deleted the message without responding. Let them talk. He was tired of living his life according to other people's expectations. Ever since his father's death 2 years ago, the weight of family tradition had been suffocating him. Still, even he had to admit this was impulsive, even reckless. The tabloids would have a field day. His conservative business partners would question his judgment. But for the first time in years, he felt interested, intrigued. He opened the file the agency had sent him on Trinity. Her background check was clean, her references impeccable. But Malik had been in business long enough to know that official documents never told the whole story. There was something more to Trinity Robinson, some secret she was protecting. "Sir," his assistant knocked on the door. "The car is ready to pick up Miss Robinson." Malik nodded, straightening his jacket. Time to begin this unexpected chapter of his life. The black luxury car pulled up to Malik Al-Hassan's mansion just as the morning heat was starting to build. Trinity stepped out, clutching her small suitcase. The house looked like something out of a magazine, all white stone and graceful, arches with perfectly manicured gardens stretching in every direction. A stern-faced housekeeper met her at the door. "I am Mrs. Samira," she said, her accent thick. "I manage the household. Come, I will show you your rooms." Trinity followed her through halls decorated with priceless artwork and crystal chandeliers. The floors were marble, and her heels clicked with every step. This wasn't just wealth. It was old money, generations of it. "These are your quarters," Mrs. Samira said, opening a door to reveal a suite bigger than Trinity's entire apartment back home. "Mr. Al-Hassan expects you for breakfast in 30 minutes. Do not be late." As soon as she was alone, Trinity pulled out her phone. No signal. She'd have to figure out how to call Marcus later. Right now, she needed to get ready to face her. What was she supposed to call him? Owner? The thought made her stomach turn. Trinity changed into a modest blue dress the agency had provided and made her way to the breakfast terrace. Malik was already there, reading something on his tablet. He didn't look up when she approached. "Sit," he said, simply. Trinity sat, her back straight, hands folded in her lap. A servant immediately appeared with coffee and an array of breakfast foods she didn't recognize. "I have rules," Malik said, finally looking at her. His dark eyes were intense, almost angry. "You will learn them quickly if you wish to stay here." "I signed the contract," Trinity replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I know the rules. The contract is paper. I'm talking about real rules." Malik put down his tablet. "You will dress modestly at all times. You will not leave the grounds without my permission. You will accompany me to social events when required, and you will never ever embarrass me in public." Trinity felt her temper flare. "I'm not a child, Mr. Al-Hassan. I know how to behave in public." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "We'll see, and you will call me Malik. Mr. Al-Hassan was my father." Just then, a woman burst onto the terrace. She was younger than Malik, dressed in expensive designer clothes, her face perfect with makeup. "So it's true," she said in English, looking Trinity up and down. "You really did it, brother. Have you completely lost your mind?" "Trinity, meet my sister Amira," Malik said calmly. "Amira, this is Trinity Robinson. She will be staying with us for the next year." "This is beneath you," Amira spat. "What would Father say?" "Father is dead," Malik replied coldly, "and I don't recall asking for your opinion." Amira turned to Trinity. "Listen to me carefully. You may have fooled my brother with whatever act you're playing, but I know exactly what you are: a gold digger, an opportunist. This is our family's home, and you don't belong here." Trinity stood up slowly, her voice quiet but firm. "You're right about one thing, Miss Al-Hassan. I am an opportunist. I saw an opportunity to make a better life, and I took it. But don't for a second think you know anything about me or why I'm here." Malik watched the exchange with interest. Most women would have cowered under Amira's attack, but Trinity stood her ground, dignified but not aggressive. "Interesting." "That's enough, Amira," he said. "Trinity is here at my invitation. She will be treated with respect." Amira stormed off, leaving an uncomfortable silence behind her. Trinity sank back into her chair, her hands shaking slightly as she reached for her coffee cup. "You handled that well," Malik observed. "I've dealt with worse," Trinity replied. And she had racist clients at the law firm, judgmental parents at Marcus's school, but thinking about Marcus made her heart ache. She needed to find a way to call him. The rest of breakfast passed in silence. Afterward, Mrs. Samira appeared to give Trinity a tour of the house and explain her schedule. There would be etiquette lessons, Arabic language classes, and a complete wardrobe fitting. "Mr. Al-Hassan has many important business associates," Mrs. Samira explained. "You must learn to be a proper hostess." By evening, Trinity's head was spinning with rules and expectations. She finally managed to get a signal on her phone and called Mrs. Jackson's apartment. "Mommy!" Marcus's voice made tears spring to her eyes. "Where are you? When are you coming home?" "I'm still on my business trip, baby," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Are you being good for Mrs. Jackson?" "Yes, but I miss you. And some kids at school were mean today. They said we're poor." Trinity's heart broke. "Don't you listen to them, Marcus. Things are going to be different soon, I promise." After hanging up, Trinity sat on her massive bed and let the tears fall. She was doing this for Marcus, she reminded herself. Every humiliation, every cold look, every demanding rule, it was all for him. A knock at her door made her quickly wipe her eyes. It was Malik. "We have a dinner engagement tomorrow night," he said. "Something suitable to wear will be delivered in the morning." He paused, studying her face. "Have you been crying?" "No," Trinity said quickly. "It's just allergies." Malik's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "The first few weeks are always the hardest," he said, his voice softer than she'd heard it before. "It gets easier." Before she could respond, he was gone. Trinity went to the window, looking out at the Dubai skyline glittering against the desert night. Somewhere in that city full of money and power, she would have to find a way to survive, to keep her secret, to make this sacrifice worth it. In his study, Malik poured himself a drink and thought about the woman currently staying in his guest wing. She was a puzzle, proud but vulnerable, strong but clearly hiding something. When she'd stood up to Amira, he'd seen a fire in her that the agency's photos hadn't captured. His phone buzzed with messages from business associates, all trying to politely ask if he'd lost his mind. The conservative Arab business world was not known for its tolerance of unconventional relationships. But for the first time in years, Malik felt awake, alive. He pulled up the security feed from the garden cameras and saw Trinity walking alone among the flowers, her phone pressed to her ear. She was crying again, having what looked like an intense conversation. Who was she talking to? What secrets was she keeping? Malik Al-Hassan had built his fortune by solving problems and unlocking puzzles. Now he had a new one living in his house, and he intended to figure out exactly what Trinity Robinson was hiding. 3 weeks had passed since Trinity arrived at the Al-Hassan mansion. She was starting to learn the rhythms of the household, when to speak, when to stay silent, how to dress for different occasions. But every night she cried herself to sleep after talking to Marcus. "The other kids want to come over for a play date," Marcus told her during their nightly call. But Mrs. Jackson said no. "When are you coming home, Mom?" "Soon, baby," Trinity lied, her heart breaking. "Are you doing your homework? Eating your vegetables?" After hanging up, Trinity sat on her balcony looking at the stars. The night air was cool, a relief from the desert heat. She was so lost in thought, she didn't hear Malik approach. "You make these calls every night," he said, making her jump. "Who is so important back home?" Trinity's heart raced. "Just checking on my apartment, my bills, making sure everything's taken care of." Malik stepped closer, his expression unreadable in the darkness. "You're a terrible liar, Trinity Robinson." Before she could respond, Mrs. Samira appeared. "Sir, Mr. Karim has arrived for your meeting." Malik gave Trinity one last long look before leaving. She let out a shaky breath. He was getting suspicious, and she needed to be more careful. The next morning, Trinity accompanied Malik to a charity gala at one of Dubai's most exclusive hotels. She wore a designer gown in deep blue, modest but elegant. The other guests stared and whispered behind their hands. "Ignore them," Malik said quietly as they entered the ballroom. "Hold your head high." "I'm used to people staring," Trinity replied. "Been dealing with it my whole life." Something softened in Malik's eyes. "Tell me about your life in America." For a moment, Trinity was tempted to tell him everything, about Marcus, about their struggles, about why she was really here. But, before she could speak, a group of businessmen approached. "Malik, my friend," one of them called out, "we've been dying to meet your new companion." The way he said the word made it sound dirty. Trinity felt Malik stiffen beside her. "Trinity," he said formally, "meet Abdullah Karim and his associates. They're potential investors in our new technology division." "Charmed," Abdullah said, his eyes roaming over Trinity in a way that made her skin crawl. "Tell me, how does a woman like you end up in such an arrangement?" Before Trinity could answer, Malik stepped forward. Trinity studied business at Spelman College. Perhaps she'd be interested in hearing about the investment opportunity. The men laughed, clearly not taking him seriously. But Trinity straightened her spine and said, "Actually, I would. I'm particularly interested in how you plan to handle the emerging markets in Southeast Asia." The room went quiet. Trinity had spent weeks reading Malik's business journals while he was at work, learning everything she could about his industry. Now she watched with satisfaction as Abdullah's smug smile faded. Later that night, in the car ride home, Malik was unusually quiet. "I apologize for their behavior," he finally said. "Don't," Trinity replied. "I'm not made of glass. I can handle a few rude men." "You surprised them." "You surprised me." He turned to look at her. "Where did you learn about Southeast Asian markets?" "I read. A lot. Being underestimated gives you time to observe, to learn." Malik nodded slowly. "You're full of surprises, Trinity Robinson." Back at the mansion, Trinity changed out of her gown and tried to call Marcus. No answer. She tried Mrs. Jackson's number. Still nothing. Panic started to rise in her chest. Finally, Mrs. Jackson called back. "Trinity, Marcus had an accident at school. He's okay, but he needed stitches. He's been asking for you." Trinity felt like she couldn't breathe. Her baby was hurt, and she wasn't there. Without thinking, she ran downstairs to find Malik. He was in his study, looking at some papers. "I need to go home," Trinity blurted out. "Just for a few days, please." Malik looked up, surprised by her sudden appearance and the desperation in her voice. "That's not possible. The contract clearly states—" "I don't care about the contract." Trinity's voice broke. "Someone I love is hurt and they need me." "Someone you love?" Malik stood up slowly. "And who might that be?" Trinity realized her mistake too late. She backed away, shaking her head. "I shouldn't have bothered you. I'm sorry." But Malik moved faster, catching her arm before she could leave. "No more lies, Trinity. What are you hiding?" The touch of his hand on her arm sent an unexpected shiver through her body. They were standing close, too close. Trinity could smell his cologne, could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "Please," she whispered, "let me go." Something changed in Malik's expression, a softening, a moment of understanding. He released her arm but didn't step back. "I have a private jet," he said quietly. "It can have you in Atlanta by morning, but when you return you will tell me the truth, all of it." Trinity's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she breathed. 2 hours later, she was on Malik's private jet, flying back to Atlanta, to Marcus, but her relief was mixed with dread. When she returned, she would have to tell Malik about her son, about the real reason she'd agreed to this arrangement, and somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean, Trinity realized something that scared her even more than losing her secret. She was starting to care what Malik thought of her, starting to care about him. In Dubai, Malik sat in his study, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He'd already put his best investigator on the task of uncovering Trinity's secret, but as he remembered the look in her eyes, fierce love mixed with fear, he wondered if he really wanted to discover the truth this way. For the first time in his life, Malik al-Hassan wanted someone to trust him enough to tell him the truth on their own. The question was, would Trinity be that someone? Trinity rushed through the hospital corridors, her heart pounding. She found Marcus in a small examination room, his arm bandaged and his eyes red from crying. The moment he saw her, his whole face lit up. "Mommy!" he cried out, jumping off the examination table and running into her arms. "You came back!" Trinity held him tight, breathing in his familiar smell. "Of course I came back, baby. I'll always come back for you." Mrs. Jackson stood in the corner, looking worried. "He fell during recess," she explained. 12 stitches, he was so brave." Trinity examined the bandage on Marcus's arm, fighting back tears. "What happened, baby?" "Some big kids were making fun of me," Marcus said quietly. "Said I was poor, and my daddy didn't want me. I tried to show them I could climb as high as they could on the monkey bars, but I slipped." Trinity's heart broke. All her sacrifices to give him a better life, and he was still getting bullied. She hugged him closer, not caring that her expensive clothes were getting wrinkled. Back at their old apartment, Trinity tucked Marcus into bed. He refused to let go of her hand. "Don't go away again," he pleaded. "Please, Mom." "Baby, I have to," Trinity said gently. "But it's not forever. And soon we'll have enough money for a new house, and you can go to a better school." "Where do you go when you leave?" Marcus asked. "Is it because of the mean man?" Trinity froze. "What mean man?" "I heard Mrs. Jackson talking on the phone. She said some rich mean man bought you, is that true?" Before Trinity could answer, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Malik. "My investigator just sent me some interesting information about a birth certificate. We need to talk." Trinity's blood ran cold. She looked at Marcus, already falling asleep, then back at her phone. Everything was falling apart. Meanwhile, in Dubai, Malik sat in his study, staring at the file his investigator had sent. Marcus Anthony Robinson, born 8 years ago at Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta. Mother, Trinity Robinson. Father, unknown. He poured himself another drink, trying to sort through his feelings. Anger at being lied to, confusion about why she'd kept this secret, and something else. A strange ache when he looked at the boy's photo. He had Trinity's eyes. His phone rang. It was Amira. "Have you seen the tabloids?" she demanded without greeting. "Your American ran back home. Everyone's talking about it. You're becoming a laughingstock." "She'll be back," Malik said firmly. "Are you sure about that, and what about the boy?" Malik's grip tightened on his phone. "What do you know about that?" "Oh, brother," Amira laughed coldly. "Did you really think I wouldn't have her investigated? A black single mother with a bastard child. Wait until the board hears about this. They already think you've lost your mind." "Stay out of it, Amira," Malik warned. "This is between me and Trinity. No, this is about our family's reputation. Father would be ashamed." Malik ended the call, his hands shaking with rage. But who was he really angry at? Trinity for lying? Amira for her cruel words? Or himself for caring so much? In Atlanta, Trinity spent the next day getting Marcus settled. She hired a full-time nurse to help Mrs. Jackson, paid 6 months of rent in advance, and arranged for Marcus to transfer to a better school. "I don't understand," Mrs. Jackson said. "How can you afford all this?" Trinity couldn't explain about the contract, about Malik, about any of it. She just hugged Marcus one last time, promising to call every day, then headed to the airport where Malik's private jet was waiting. The flight back to Dubai was the longest of her life. When she finally arrived at the mansion, Malik was waiting in his study. The file was open on his desk. "Sit," he commanded, his voice cold. Trinity sat, her back straight, chin held high. "I suppose there's no point denying it now." "A child," Malik said quietly. "You have a child, and you didn't think to mention this before signing a year-long contract. Would you have still bid on me if you'd known?" Trinity shot back. "Would any of those men have wanted a single mother? That's not the point." Malik slammed his hand on the desk. "You lied to me, made me look like a fool. I did what I had to do to protect my son." Trinity stood up, her own anger rising. "You have no idea what it's like, watching your child go hungry because you can't afford groceries, seeing him get bullied because his clothes are second-hand. Everything I've done, everything has been for him." Malik stared at her for a long moment. Then he pulled out the contract from his desk drawer and held it up. "This contract explicitly forbids children," he said. "It's grounds for immediate termination. No compensation." Trinity felt her world spinning. No compensation meant no better school for Marcus, no safe neighborhood, no secure future. She'd failed him. "Please," she whispered, her pride crumbling. "He's just a little boy. He needs this chance at a better life." Something shifted in Malik's expression. He stood up and walked to the window, his back to her. "Tell me about him," he said finally. Trinity blinked in surprise. "What? Your son? Tell me about him." So Trinity told him everything. About Marcus's love for Spider-Man and mathematics, his quick wit and kind heart, how he always saved half his dessert for her, even when she told him not to. As she spoke, she saw Malik's shoulders gradually relax. When he finally turned back to face her, his eyes were different, softer. "Why didn't you trust me enough to tell me?" he asked. "I don't trust anyone when it comes to Marcus," Trinity admitted. "His father walked out before he was born. Since then, it's just been us against the world." Malik was quiet for a long time. Then he picked up the contract and slowly, deliberately, tore it in half. Trinity's heart stopped. "What are you doing?" "This contract is worthless," he said. "It was based on lies." Before Trinity could speak, he held up his hand. "Let me finish. I'm drawing up a new one. No restrictions on children. No secrets." "I don't understand," Trinity whispered. "I want you to bring Marcus here," Malik said. "To live with us." Trinity stared at him in shock. "But your family, your reputation, let me worry about that." He stepped closer to her, close enough that she could see the warmth in his dark eyes. "I'm tired of living by other people's rules, and I think you are too." Trinity felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "Why would you do this?" Malik reached out and gently wiped away one of her tears. "Because for the first time in my life, I've met someone who challenges me, surprises me, makes me question everything I thought I knew." He pulled back slightly, straightening his jacket. "Besides, I've always wanted to learn about Spider-Man." Trinity laughed through her tears, but as she looked at Malik, she saw something that scared her more than any contract or secret. She saw possibility, hope, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of love. In the shadows outside the study, Amira stood listening, her face dark with anger. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number. "It's worse than we thought," she said quietly. "He's inviting the child to live here. We need to move forward with the plan now." 2 weeks after Malik tore up the original contract, Marcus arrived at the Dubai mansion. His eyes were wide as saucers as he took in the grand entrance hall with its crystal chandeliers and marble floors. "Mom, this place is like a castle," he exclaimed, still clutching his Spider-Man backpack. "Do you really live here?" Trinity squeezed his hand. "We live here now, baby, both of us." Malik stood at the top of the grand staircase watching their reunion. He'd never had much experience with children, and something about this small boy made him nervous. What if Marcus didn't like him? What if he couldn't be what this child needed? "Marcus," Trinity said gently, "I want you to meet someone very important. This is Malik." Marcus looked up at the tall man in the expensive suit. "Are you the mean rich man who bought my mom?" The room went silent. Trinity's face flushed with embarrassment, but to everyone's surprise, Malik laughed. A real laugh, not the polite chuckle he used at business meetings. "I suppose I am," he said, coming down the stairs, "though I'm trying not to be mean anymore. Your mother is helping me with that." Marcus studied him carefully. "Do you like Spider-Man?" "I'm learning about him," Malik replied seriously. "Perhaps you could teach me?" A slow smile spread across Marcus's face. "I brought all my comics. We can start with the origin story." Mrs. Samira appeared, looking uncomfortable. "Sir, where shall I put the child's things?" "In the blue suite next to his mother's room," Malik said. "And Marcus will need a desk for his schoolwork. Have one brought up." "A desk of my own?" Marcus's eyes lit up. "Mom, did you hear that?" Trinity watched as Malik led Marcus up the stairs, pointing out different rooms and asking questions about Spider-Man. Her heart felt like it might burst, but a shadow crossed her face as she remembered Amira's cold stare at breakfast that morning. Later that night, after Marcus was asleep in his new room, Trinity found Malik in his study. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." Malik looked up from his work. "He's a remarkable child, smart, observant. He gets that from having to grow up too fast." Trinity sat down across from him. "Malik, what are we doing here, really?" Before he could answer, his phone buzzed. His face darkened as he read the message. "What's wrong?" Trinity asked. "The board of directors has called an emergency meeting. Tomorrow. Amira's been busy." He ran a hand through his hair. "They're questioning my fitness to lead the company. Because of me? Because of Marcus? Because I'm not playing by their rules anymore." Malik stood up and walked to the window. "My father built this company on tradition, on doing things the way they've always been done. Now they think I'm destroying his legacy." Trinity felt sick. "I never meant to cause trouble for you." Malik turned to face her, his eyes intense. "You didn't cause anything. I made my choices, and I'll deal with the consequences." But the consequences came faster than either of them expected. The next morning, the local papers ran headlines about the American woman and her secret child. Photos of Marcus playing in the mansion's garden were splashed across the front pages. "How did they get these pictures?" Trinity demanded, her hands shaking as she held the newspaper. "The garden is private property." "Someone inside the house must have taken them," Malik said grimly. "Someone who wants to destroy us." Amira burst into the breakfast room, waving her own copy of the paper. "Well, brother, you've really done it now. The conservative families are pulling their investments. The board is in an uproar, all because you couldn't control your infatuation with this. Choose your next words very carefully, sister." Malik's voice was deadly quiet. "Remember, you're talking about my family." Amira's eyes widened. "Family? You can't be serious. This woman and her bastard child will never be part of our family. Get out." Malik stood up slowly. "Get out of my house." "It's our house," Amira spat. "Father left it to both of us, and I won't stand by while you destroy everything he built." She stormed out, leaving behind a heavy silence. Trinity felt tears burning in her eyes. "I should take Marcus and go," she whispered, "before we ruin everything for you." "No." Malik moved to her side, taking her hands in his. "Listen to me, Trinity. My whole life I've done what was expected of me, been who everyone wanted me to be until you came along, you and Marcus. You make me want to be better, to build something new." Trinity looked up at him, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. "But your company is just a company. I can build another one." He touched her cheek gently. "What I feel for you, that's not something I can replace." The moment was broken by Marcus's voice from the doorway. "Mom, why is that mean lady saying we have to leave?" Trinity and Malik turned to see Marcus standing there in his Spider-Man pajamas, looking scared. Before Trinity could respond, Malik walked over and knelt down to the boy's level. "No one is making you leave, Marcus," he said firmly. "This is your home now. Both of you belong here with me." Marcus studied him with those two wise eyes. "Promise?" "I promise." Malik held out his hand solemnly. "Spider-Man honor?" Marcus broke into a grin and shook his hand. "Spider-Man honor!" But even as Trinity watched this touching scene, her heart was troubled. She'd seen the darkness in Amira's eyes, the hatred. This wasn't over. In a luxurious office across town, Amira sat across from Abdullah Karim, Malik's biggest business rival. "Everything is proceeding as planned," she said. "The board is turning against him. The social pressure is mounting. Soon, he'll have no choice but to send them away." Abdullah smiled coldly. "And if he doesn't?" "Then we move to Plan B." Amira pulled out a file. "I found Marcus's father. He's willing to cause trouble in for the right price." Outside the window, storm clouds gathered over Dubai, a symbol of the darkness that was coming for this newfound family's happiness. Trinity was helping Marcus with his homework in the mansion's library when Mrs. Samira appeared at the door, her face tense. "Miss Robinson," she said stiffly, "there's someone here to see you." Trinity looked up, expecting another reporter or maybe one of Malik's business associates. Instead, she found herself staring into a face she hadn't seen in 9 years. "Hello, Trinity," said James Parker, Marcus's father. "Long time no see." Trinity's blood ran cold. She turned to Marcus quickly. "Baby, go to your room and start getting ready for bed. I'll be up soon." "But Mom..." "Now, Marcus." Something in her voice made Marcus obey without argument. As soon as he was gone, Trinity rounded on James. "How dare you come here?" she hissed. "How did you even find us?" James looked around the opulent library with a smirk. "Nice place you've got here. Really moved up in the world, haven't you? A little boy told me his mom was living in a castle in Dubai. Wasn't hard to figure out which castle." "Get out," Trinity said, her voice shaking. "You gave up any right to be in our lives when you walked out on us." "Actually," James pulled out some papers, I never legally gave up my parental rights, and I'm thinking it's time I got to know my son. Unless, of course, we can come to some kind of arrangement." Before Trinity could respond, a deep voice came from the doorway. "Is there a problem here?" Malik stood there, his presence filling the room. James straightened up, trying to match Malik's imposing stance. "No problem," James said smoothly. "Just catching up with an old friend. I'm James Parker, Marcus's father. The father who abandoned his pregnant girlfriend and hasn't paid a dime in child support for 8 years. Malik's voice was ice cold. "That, James Parker?" James's smile faltered slightly. "Look, I've changed. I want to make things right, be part of my son's life." "You mean you want money?" Trinity spat. "How much did Amira pay you to do this?" A flicker of surprise crossed James's face before he could hide it. Malik caught it and stepped closer. "My sister contacted you, didn't she?" When James didn't respond, Malik continued, "Let me explain something very clearly. If you ever come near Trinity or Marcus again, I will bury you in so many lawsuits. You'll never see daylight. Now get out of my house." James backed away, but at the door he turned. "This isn't over, Trinity. I have rights." After he left, Trinity collapsed into a chair, shaking. Malik was immediately at her side. "He can't take Marcus," she whispered. "I won't let him." "Neither will I," Malik promised. He pulled out his phone. "I'm calling my lawyers right now. We'll file for full custody, get restraining orders, whatever it takes." Trinity looked up at him through tears. "Why are you doing all this for us?" Malik knelt in front of her chair, taking her hands in his. Because I love you, both of you. I didn't plan it, didn't want it, but it happened, and I'm tired of fighting it." Before Trinity could respond, they heard a small voice from the doorway. "Was that my dad?" They turned to see Marcus standing there, looking smaller than usual, in his Spider-Man pajamas. Trinity opened her arms and he ran into them. "Why did he come now?" Marcus asked. "Why didn't he want me before?" "Oh, baby," Trinity held him tight. "Some people just don't know a good thing when they have it, but that's their loss." "Indeed it is," Malik said, putting a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "And their loss is my gain." Marcus looked up at him with wet eyes. "Can you be my dad instead?" The question hung in the air, loaded with meaning. Trinity held her breath, waiting for Malik's response. Malik's voice was rough with emotion when he answered. "I would be honored, Marcus, if that's what you want, if it's what both of you want." Trinity felt tears sliding down her cheeks as she watched Malik pull Marcus into a hug. This was everything she'd ever wanted for her son. A real father, a man who chose to love him. But their moment of happiness was short-lived. The next morning, papers arrived from James's lawyers, demanding joint custody. And worse, Amira had called an emergency board meeting. "They're voting tomorrow," Malik told Trinity that night in his study, "on whether to remove me as CEO. "This is all my fault," Trinity said. "If I hadn't come into your life, then I'd still be living." "Half a life," Malik interrupted, "following rules and traditions that mean nothing. You and Marcus gave me something to fight for." He pulled her into his arms, and Trinity let herself lean into his strength. But as she looked out the window at the Dubai skyline, she saw storm, clouds gathering. Tomorrow would bring either triumph or disaster. Across town, in a dimly lit office, Amira sat with Abdullah Karim and James Parker. "Everything is ready," Amira said. "Tomorrow, we destroy my brother's perfect little family. And we all get what we want," Abdullah added with a cold smile. "I get the company. You get your family's reputation back, and Mr. Parker here gets a very generous settlement." James looked uncomfortable. The boy seemed happy there. "Having second thoughts?" Amira's voice was dangerous. "Remember our agreement. Either you play your part, or certain people might discover your involvement in that bank fraud 5 years ago." James slumped in defeat. No second thoughts. Back at the mansion, Marcus was having trouble sleeping. He crept out of his room and found Malik in his study. "Can't sleep?" Malik asked, setting aside his work. Marcus shook his head. "I'm scared my real dad will take me away." Malik lifted the boy onto his lap. "Listen to me, Marcus. Family isn't about blood or legal papers. It's about love and choice, and I choose you and your mother. I will always choose you." "Spider-Man honor." Marcus held out his small hand. Malik took it solemnly. "Spider-Man honor." As Marcus finally drifted off to sleep in Malik's arms, Trinity watched from the doorway, her heart full. Tomorrow might bring chaos, but right now, in this moment, she knew they were exactly where they were meant to be. But sometimes, the greatest storms come when you least expect them. And This family's greatest test was just beginning. The morning of the board meeting dawned hot and humid. Trinity helped Malik straighten his tie, trying to hide how badly her hands were shaking. "Whatever happens today," she said softly, "we'll face it together." Malik caught her hands in his. "I've had my lawyers draw up papers. If they remove me as CEO, I still have my personal fortune, enough to fight James for custody, to give Marcus everything he needs." "I don't care about the money," Trinity insisted. "I just want our family to be safe." From the doorway came Marcus's voice. "Mom, the mean lady is here again." They turned to see Amira striding into the foyer dressed in an expensive black suit. Behind her came Abdullah Karim, and to Trinity's horror, James Parker. "What is this?" Malik demanded. "Just making sure everyone arrives at the board meeting together," Amira said smoothly. "After all, the board should meet Marcus's real father." "Don't you think?" Marcus pressed closer to Trinity's side. "You're not my real father," he said to James. "You're just the man who left us." James had the decency to look ashamed, but Amira cut in before he could speak. "The car is waiting," she announced. "Shall we?" The ride to the corporate headquarters was tense. Marcus sat between Trinity and Malik, holding both their hands. James kept trying to catch the boy's eye, but Marcus stubbornly looked away. The boardroom was packed when they arrived. Old men in expensive suits looked down their noses at Trinity and Marcus. She heard whispers, saw the judgmental stares. "The board will see Mr. Al-Hassan alone first," the chairman announced. Before Malik went in, he knelt down to Marcus's level. "Remember what I promised, Spider-Man honor?" Marcus nodded bravely. Spider-Man honor. Inside the boardroom, Malik faced his accusers. For 2 hours they questioned his judgment, his leadership, his commitment to tradition. Amira presented evidence of dropping stock prices, cancelled contracts, conservative investors pulling out. "And now you've brought scandal to our door," the chairman said gravely. "This American woman, her illegitimate child, that illegitimate child is the son of my heart," Malik interrupted, his voice firm. "And Trinity is the woman I intend to marry." A shocked murmur ran through the room. Amira's face went pale. "You can't be serious," she sputtered. "Brother, think about what you're saying." "I've never been more serious." Malik stood tall. "My father built this company on tradition, yes, but he also built it on family, on love. He taught us that family comes first, always." "And what about the child's real father?" Abdullah Karim spoke up smoothly. "Mr. Parker has rights, after all." Malik smiled coldly. "Interesting that you know so much about Mr. Parker's rights, Abdullah, almost as if you've been coordinating with him?" He nodded to his assistant, who passed out folders to each board member. Inside were photos, Amira meeting secretly with Abdullah and James, bank transfers, emails discussing their plot. "My sister and Mr. Karim orchestrated this entire crisis," Malik announced. "They paid James Parker to cause trouble. They leaked stories to the press. They engineered the drop in stock prices by spreading rumors to investors." The boardroom erupted in chaos. Amira jumped to her feet, but security guards appeared at the doors. "This is nonsense," she shouted. "You have no proof." "Actually," came a new voice, "he has a witness." James Parker stood in the doorway, looking uncomfortable, but determined. "I can't do this anymore," he said. "Miss Al-Hassan approached me 3 weeks ago, offered me money to claim custody of Marcus, said it would help restore the family's honor." Amira's face contorted with rage. "To you, traitor, we had a deal." "I saw my son," James said quietly. "Saw how happy he is, how loved. I won't be part of destroying that. Not for any amount of money." The chairman called for order. After a brief discussion, the board voted. Malik would remain CEO. Amira and Abdullah would face criminal charges for corporate espionage and market manipulation. As security led them away, Amira turned to Malik one last time. "Brother, please, we're family." "No," Malik said sadly. "Family doesn't try to destroy each other. Trinity and Marcus, they're my family now." Outside the boardroom, Trinity and Marcus waited anxiously. When Malik emerged, Marcus ran to him. "Did you win?" the boy asked. Malik scooped him up. "We all won." James approached cautiously. "Trinity, can we talk?" Trinity tensed, but Malik squeezed her hand reassuringly. They found a quiet corner while Malik distracted Marcus with plans for ice cream. "I'm sorry," James said simply, "for everything, for leaving, for coming back like this, for letting them use me." "Why did you change your mind?" Trinity asked. "Because I saw what I threw away. That boy, he has a real father now, better than I ever could have been." James pulled out some papers. These are signed documents giving up all parental rights. Malik's lawyers drew them up. I won't bother you again. Trinity felt tears in her eyes. Thank you. As James walked away, Malik and Marcus joined her. Marcus was chattering excitedly about getting chocolate ice cream with extra sprinkles. Actually, Malik said, I have a better idea. What do you both say to a trip to New York? I hear they're filming the new Spider-Man movie there. Marcus's eyes went wide. Really? Can we go see it? Better than that, Malik smiled. I bought us tickets to the premiere and... He got down on one knee, pulling out a small box. I thought it might be a good place for a wedding, if your mother says yes. Trinity's hands flew to her mouth as Malik opened the box to reveal a stunning diamond ring. Marcus started jumping, up and down. Say yes, Mum, say yes. Through happy tears, Trinity nodded. Yes, 1,000 times yes. As Malik slipped the ring on her finger and pulled her into a kiss, Marcus hugged them both. Around them, the board members and employees who had gathered to watch broke into applause. But in the back of the crowd, a figure watched with dark eyes. Abdullah Karim's assistant pulled out a phone and dialed a number. It's done. They're all distracted with the happy ending. Should I proceed with the real plan? A voice on the other end answered, yes, let them have their moment. Soon they'll learn that every fairy tale has a dark side. The New York trip was everything Marcus had dreamed of and more. They stayed in a penthouse suite overlooking Central Park, and Malik arranged a private tour of the Spider-Man movie set. Marcus got to meet the actors and even try on a real costume. This is the best day ever, Marcus exclaimed, bouncing on his hotel bed, still wearing the mini Spider-Man suit the crew had given him. Can we live here forever? Trinity smiled as she packed for their return to Dubai. We have to go home, baby, but we'll come back for the wedding. The wedding plans were already underway. Trinity had found a beautiful venue in Manhattan, and Malik had insisted on flying in a famous designer to create her dress. Everything was perfect, too perfect. You're worried, Malik said that night after Marcus was asleep. They stood on the penthouse balcony looking out at the city lights. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, Trinity admitted. My whole life, whenever things started going well, something would happen to ruin it. Malik pulled her close. Not this time. Amira and Abdullah are facing charges. James has signed away his rights. We're free to be happy. But back in Dubai, trouble was brewing. Abdullah's assistant, Sarah Chen, sat in a dimly lit office with a man whose face was hidden in shadow. Everything is proceeding according to plan, Sarah reported. They're distracted with wedding plans. Security is relaxed. Good, the man replied. Abdullah may have failed, but we won't. The Al Hassan Empire will fall, and we'll be there to pick up the pieces. The next morning, Trinity woke to find Malik already on his phone, his face tense. What's wrong? She asked. Someone's been accessing our secure servers, he said. Corporate secrets, client lists, everything. The IT team can't trace the breach. Before Trinity could respond, Marcus ran in excitedly. Mom, Malik, look what came in the mail. He held up an envelope containing a Spider-Man comic book. It's a rare edition. The card says it's an early wedding present. Trinity frowned. Who sent it? Doesn't say. Marcus opened the comic carefully. Can I read it now? After breakfast, Trinity said. Something about the anonymous gift made her uneasy. Later that day, back at the mansion in Dubai, Trinity was helping Marcus with his homework when she noticed him rubbing his eyes. You okay, baby? Just tired, Marcus yawned, and my head hurts a little. Trinity felt his forehead. He was warm, too warm. Mrs. Samira, she called out. Can you bring the thermometer? But when Mrs. Samira took Marcus's temperature, it was normal. Still, something wasn't right. Marcus was never tired in the middle of the day. By dinner time, Marcus could barely keep his eyes open. When he nearly face-planted in his soup, Trinity knew something was seriously wrong. We need to get him to a hospital, she told Malik. At the emergency room, doctors ran tests while Trinity paced anxiously. Malik made calls, pulling strings to get the best specialists. Finally, a doctor emerged looking grave. We found traces of an unknown substance in his bloodstream, some kind of synthetic toxin. Has he been exposed to anything unusual recently? Trinity's mind raced. Then she remembered the comic book. She ran to call the mansion. Mrs. Samira, the comic book Marcus got this morning. Where is it? I put it away in his room, miss. Should I? Don't touch it. Call the police. Tell them we need toxic substance experts. The lab results confirmed Trinity's fears. The comic book pages had been treated with a slow-acting contact poison. Just touching them had exposed Marcus to the toxin. Who would do this? Trinity sobbed as she watched Marcus sleep, hooked up to monitors and IVs. He's just a little boy. Malik's face was dark with fury. Someone trying to hurt me by hurting the people I love. He pulled out his phone. I'm calling in every favor, every contact. We'll find who did this. But they didn't have to wait long. A text message arrived on Malik's phone. Your sister wasn't thinking big enough. She just wanted to separate you from them. We want to destroy you completely. The antidote for the boy exists. The price is your entire company. You have 24 hours. Trinity read the message over his shoulder and felt her blood run cold. Malik, don't, he said firmly. Don't even suggest that Marcus's life isn't worth more than any company. He immediately began the paperwork to transfer ownership of his entire business empire to a numbered offshore account. But as Trinity watched him sign away everything he'd built, she noticed his hands were shaking. I'm so sorry, she whispered. Malik looked up at her fiercely. Never apologize for giving me a family worth sacrificing everything for. Just then, Marcus stirred in his hospital bed. Mum? Malik. I don't feel so good. The monitors started beeping faster. A team of doctors rushed in as Marcus began seizing. We're losing him, one doctor shouted. Trinity screamed. Malik held her back as the medical team worked frantically to stabilize Marcus. After what seemed like hours, the lead doctor emerged. He's stable for now, but the toxin is spreading faster than we expected. Whatever you're planning to do, do it quick. He may not have 24 hours. Malik's phone buzzed with another message. Time is running out. Tick-tock. But as he reached for the final transfer documents, Trinity grabbed his arm. Wait, she said. The message. Something about it seems familiar. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through old work emails from her time at the law firm. Then she found it, an internal memo about a case involving industrial espionage and synthetic toxins. Sarah Chen, Trinity breathed. She was Abdullah's assistant. But before that, she worked for a pharmaceutical company that was sued for developing illegal bioweapons. The case was settled quietly. Malik immediately called his security team. Within hours, they tracked Sarah to a private airfield. She was attempting to flee the country. When the police arrested her, they found the antidote in her briefcase. She broke under questioning and revealed her accomplices, a group of corporate raiders who had been waiting for years to take over the Al Hassan empire. The antidote was rushed to Marcus. Hours later, his fever broke. Can I have a cheeseburger? Were his first words upon waking. Hospital food is yucky. Trinity laughed through her tears, holding her son close. Malik joined their embrace and, for a moment, they just held each other. But later that night, after Marcus was asleep, Trinity found Malik standing alone on the hospital room balcony. What are you thinking about? She asked. How close we came to losing everything, he said quietly, and how none of it would mean anything without you and Marcus. Trinity leaned against him. So, what do we do now? Now? Malik smiled. Now we get married, and then we show the world what a real family empire looks like. In the distance, the sun was rising over Dubai, painting the sky in shades of hope. But in a prison cell across town, Sarah Chen smiled as she wrote a letter. On the envelope was a single name, Amira. The storm might have passed, but the clouds were gathering again, and this time, the stakes would be even higher. 3 weeks. After Marcus's release from the hospital, wedding preparations were in full swing. The Manhattan venue was decorated with thousands of white roses, and Trinity's designer dress was a masterpiece of silk and lace. You look like a princess, Mom, Marcus said during the final fitting. He was fully recovered, bouncing with energy in his little tuxedo. But even as Trinity smiled at her son's reflection in the mirror, a shadow crossed her face. That morning, they'd received news that made her question everything. Amira has been released from jail, Malik had told her over breakfast. Reduced. Sentence for good behavior. Now, as Trinity stood in her wedding dress, she couldn't shake the feeling of dread. In a small apartment across town, Amira sat reading Sarah Chen's letter. Her perfectly manicured nails traced the words, "The poison was just the beginning. The real plan starts at the wedding." Are you sure about this? Amira asked the man sitting across from her. It was Abdullah Karim, recently released on bail. Your brother humiliated us, Abdullah said coldly. Destroyed our reputations, our careers. The wedding is our chance to return the favor. Back at the hotel, Trinity found Malik in their suite's living room, working on his laptop. "The security plans for the wedding are set," he told her. "Every guest will be screened. Nothing will go wrong this time." Trinity sat beside him. "Maybe we should just elope. Have a small ceremony somewhere quiet." "No," Malik said firmly. "We've earned our happiness. I want the world to see me marry the woman I love." The next morning, Trinity went to pick up her mother from the airport. Rose Robinson had been skeptical when she first learned about Malik, but seeing him with Marcus had won her over. "Baby girl," Rose hugged Trinity tight. "Are you happy? Really happy?" "Happier than I've ever been," Trinity answered honestly. Scared too, but happy. As they drove back to the hotel, Trinity noticed a black car following them. She took a few random turns, and the car stayed with them. "Mum," she said calmly, "call Malik. Tell him we're being followed." Before Rose could dial, another black car cut them off. Men in masks jumped out. "Get down!" Trinity screamed, but it was too late. The last thing she saw was a man with a syringe approaching her window. She woke up in a dark room, tied to a chair. Her mother was beside her, unconscious but breathing. "Welcome back," a familiar voice said. Sarah Chen stepped into the light. "Sorry about the rough treatment, but we needed to have a chat before the wedding." "The police know all about you," Trinity said, testing her bonds. "They'll find us." "Oh, we're counting on it." Abdullah Karim emerged from the shadows. "In fact, we've already sent your location to Malik. He should be here any minute." "Why are you doing this?" "Because my brother needs to learn," Amira's voice came from behind her. "Family is about blood, not love. He chose you over his real family. Now he'll pay the price." Trinity heard cars approaching outside. Malik was coming, walking right into their trap. But they'd all forgotten one thing. While they were focused on the door, waiting for Malik, Trinity had been working on her ropes. Growing up in a rough neighborhood had taught her a few useful skills. The moment Malik burst in with his security team, Trinity broke free. She grabbed a nearby pipe and swung it at Sarah, catching her by surprise. In the chaos that followed, she managed to untie her mother while Malik's men dealt with Abdullah. But Amira had a gun. "Stop!" she screamed, pointing it at Trinity. "All of you stop!" The room froze. Malik stepped forward slowly, his hands raised. "Sister," he said softly, "look at yourself. Look at what you've become." "What I've become?" Amira's hand shook. "You chose them over me, over your own blood." "No," Malik replied. "I chose love over hate, happiness over tradition, and you couldn't handle it." "He's right, Amira," a new voice said. Everyone turned to see Mrs. Samira in the doorway. She looked different, younger, stronger. "Mother," Amira whispered. Mrs. Samira, who Trinity now realized was Malik and Amira's mother, stepped into the room. "I've watched you both since I came back," she said, "disguised as a housekeeper to see what my children had become. I saw Malik find love, find courage to be himself, and I saw you, daughter, let bitterness poison your heart. You left us." Amira's voice broke. "After father died, I left because I couldn't bear the prison of tradition anymore, just like Malik is. Breaking free now." Mrs. Samira moved closer. "But I never stopped loving you, either of you." The gun wavered in Amira's hand. Tears streamed down her face. "It's not fair," she whispered. "He gets everything, the company, a new family, love. You can have those things too," her mother said gently. "But first you have to let go of the hate." The gun clattered to the floor. Amira collapsed into her mother's arms, sobbing. As the police led Abdullah and Sarah away, Trinity hugged her own mother, who was shaken but unhurt. "I guess I'm getting a lot more family than I bargained for," Rose said weakly. Malik wrapped his arms around both of them. "Family is complicated," he said, "but love makes it worth it." Later that night, back at the hotel, Marcus climbed into bed between Trinity and Malik. "Is the wedding still happening tomorrow?" hubby asked sleepily. Trinity looked at Malik, who smiled. "Nothing could stop me from marrying your mother tomorrow." "Good," Marcus yawned. "Because I practiced my ring-bearer walk like 100 times. As Marcus drifted off to sleep, Trinity whispered to Malik, "Your mother, will she stay?" "She wants to know her grandson," Malik replied, "and maybe help Amira heal. If that's okay with you." Trinity thought about her own mother, about the power of maternal love. "Family is family," she said simply. Outside their window, the New York skyline glittered with promise. Tomorrow would bring a wedding, a new beginning, a blending of cultures and hearts. But in a small cafe across town, a man sat studying photos of the happy family. On the back of one picture was written, "The real threat was never Amira or Abdullah. Tomorrow, my dear brother Malik, you'll learn what true revenge looks like." The man smiled, tucking the photos away. In 12 hours, the wedding of Malik, Al-Hassan and Trinity Robinson would begin. And with it, one final storm would break. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear over Manhattan. In her bridal suite, Trinity stood before the mirror in her wedding dress, surrounded by her mother, Mrs. Al-Hassan, no longer pretending to be Mrs. Samira, and even Amira, who had been released into her mother's custody pending therapy and rehabilitation. "Something's missing," Rose said, adjusting Trinity's veil. Mrs. Al-Hassan stepped forward with a small box. "In our family, every bride wears this on her wedding day." She opened it to reveal a stunning diamond and sapphire necklace. "It's time for new traditions." Trinity's eyes filled with tears as the older woman fastened the necklace around her neck. This moment of peace felt almost unreal after everything they'd been through. There was a knock at the door. Marcus poked his head in, looking handsome, in his little tuxedo. "Mum, Malik says we have a problem. The priest hasn't shown up." Trinity's heart sank. After everything, was something going to go wrong now? In the groom's suite, Malik was on the phone with security. "What do you mean? He's not answering." "We confirmed everything yesterday." A staff member rushed in. "Sir, we found this in the priest's hotel room." He handed over a note. "Did you really think I wouldn't get my revenge, little brother?" Malik's face went pale. "Omar," he whispered. "Who's Omar?" Trinity asked from the doorway. She'd rushed over as soon as she heard about the priest, not caring about the superstition of the groom seeing the bride before the wedding. "My half-brother," Malik said quietly, "from my father's first marriage. He was written out of the will years ago for embezzlement. I haven't seen him in a decade." "The priest," Trinity realized. "Omar has him?" "Sir," a security guard burst in, "we traced the priest's phone. It's showing movement near the old St. Patrick's Cathedral." Malik started for the door, but Trinity caught his arm. "We're doing this together." "You can't," he protested. "You're in your wedding dress." Trinity smiled fiercely. "Watch me." 10 minutes later, a sleek black car raced through Manhattan's streets. In the back, Trinity held her wedding dress up so she could run if needed. Malik made calls coordinating with security and police. They found Omar in the abandoned cathedral, holding the terrified priest at gunpoint. "Welcome to the wedding, brother," Omar sneered. "Or what's left of it." "Let him go," Malik said calmly. "This is between us." "Everything was always between us," Omar's voice echoed off the stone walls. "Father's love, the company, the inheritance. You took it all." "You stole from the company," Malik replied. "Betrayed father's trust? You did this to yourself. And now you're building a new family?" Omar laughed bitterly. "Playing daddy to some American woman's bastard child?" Trinity stepped forward, her white dress glowing in the dim light. "That bastard child has more honor in his little finger than you have in your whole body." "The famous Trinity Robinson," Omar mocked. "Tell me, what's your price?" "Everyone has one." "Love," Trinity said simply. "Family, things you wouldn't understand." Something flickered in Omar's eyes. Pain, loneliness, regret. Trinity pressed her advantage. "It's not too late," she said softly. "Put the gun down. Be part of this family the right way." For a moment it seemed to work. Omar's hand wavered. Then Marcus's voice rang out, "Mom, Dad." Everyone turned to see Marcus running down the cathedral aisle, followed by Mrs. Al-Hassan, Rose, and Amira. Omar's face hardened. He swung the gun toward Marcus. Several things happened at once. Malik lunged for his brother. Trinity ran for Marcus. Amira, closest to the boy, pulled him behind a pillar. The gun went off. When the echo of the shot faded, Omar lay on the ground, tackled by Malik. The gun had gone off into the air, hitting nothing but ancient stone. As the police led Omar away, Marcus ran to Trinity and Malik. "Are you okay? Did the bad guy hurt you?" Malik scooped him up. "No, son, the bad guy didn't hurt anyone." Trinity looked at her watch and laughed suddenly. "Well, we're officially late to our own wedding." "Not necessarily," the priest said, straightening his collar. "This is still a house of God, and I believe we have all the necessary parties present." And so, in an old cathedral with morning light streaming through stained glass windows, Trinity and Malik were married. Not with 1,000 white roses and crystal chandeliers, but with their true family surrounding them. Marcus carried the rings perfectly. Rose and Mrs. Al-Hassan cried together in the front pew. Even Amira, standing quietly in the back, had tears in her eyes. "Do you, Malik Al-Hassan, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Malik looked at Trinity, radiant in her slightly dusty wedding dress. "I do, forever." "And do you, Trinity Robinson, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Trinity squeezed Marcus's hand as she said, "I do. All of me, all of us, forever." Later, at the reception hastily relocated to their hotel, Marcus stood to make a speech. "When I was little, I used to wish on stars for a dad," he said, his voice clear and strong. "But I got something better. I got a whole family. Mom says family isn't about blood, it's about love, and we've got lots of that." Malik raised his glass. "To family. To love," Trinity added. "To new beginnings," Mrs. Al-Hassan said, squeezing Amira's hand. That night, after Marcus had fallen asleep surrounded by wedding cake crumbs, Trinity and Malik stood on their hotel balcony. "So," Trinity smiled, "was this the fairy tale ending you expected when you bid on me at that auction?" Malik pulled her close. "Better. This isn't an ending at all, it's a beginning." Below them, New York City sparkled. In Dubai, their home waited. And around them, a family born of choice rather than blood celebrated love's victory over hate, hope's triumph over fear. Trinity thought about the scared single mother she'd been, taking a desperate chance at that auction. Malik remembered the cold, lonely man he'd been, bound by tradition and expectations. "We should thank your sister, you know," Trinity mused. "If she hadn't schemed to separate us, we might never have discovered how strong we are together." "Together," Malik agreed. "That's the only tradition that matters now." Inside, Marcus stirred in his sleep, smiling as he dreamed of his family. Not perfect, not traditional, but real and strong and full of love. And so our story ends where it truly begins, with a family built on choice, strengthened by adversity, and bound together not by blood, or contracts or tradition, but by the most powerful force of all, love. In his prison cell, Omar received a letter. Inside was a photo of the wedding party, and a note in Malik's handwriting. "When you're ready to choose love over hate, there's room for one more in this family." Omar traced the faces in the photo. His brother, Trinity, Marcus, their mother, even Amira. For the first time in years, he felt something other than anger. He felt hope. And in the end, isn't that what every good story leaves us with? Not just a happy ending, but hope for all the stories yet to come. The end.